Now that we understand parts of speech, we can start to look at how those words are grouped together to form pieces of sentences. And we can start to define how a sentence is put together. And we can start that by looking at subjects and predicates. Let's start with the subject. The subject is built around a noun that represents who or what the subject is about. Here are some examples. In this case, Josh is the subject. Josh is a person. Remember, we're thinking about nouns, so Josh kicks the ball. The next sentence, we're looking at a thing. The ball flew through the air. The ball being the subject. It's the one doing something. That's what the sentence is about. In the next sentence, Josh was shocked to see how far the ball went. Again, Josh is the subject. He's not doing anything in this case, but it's still about him. So it's the subject. And then the ball was lost in the woods. Again, we're back to an object. Person, place, or thing, right? So we got these sentences are about a person, Josh, and an object, the ball. Usually, the subject comes at the beginning of the sentence. Quentin found his shoes. My car is rolling down the street. Your homework won't do itself. Sentences are usually constructed subject, verb, subject, verb, subject, verb. That's just how English works, but it's not always like that. Sometimes the subject is harder to find. After all that whining, she didn't even eat her ice cream. In this case, she is the subject. Now, one easy way to find it, determine what part of the sentence is complete, and that's where the subject will be. After all that whining, that couldn't be a sentence by itself, so that can't contain the subject. This is the main part of the sentence, so you got the subject. When the girl spoke to him, again, that can't be a sentence, but this can. Ethan nearly peed his pants, so we know that the subject must be in the complete part of the sentence. Surrounded by darkness, the candle seemed bright. The candle seemed bright is the part that can be a sentence, so it must have the subject. Flying toward us was a bright red kite. Ooh, this one's trickier. What was doing the flying? What was the verb refer to? It refers to the kite. So the bright red kite is the subject. So sometimes it's trickier. The simple subject is the main noun or nouns in the subject. So it's often just one word. If you could distill the subject down to just one word, what would it be? For instance, in this sentence, the most important person on the team is the quarterback. The full subject is actually this. The most important person on the team, because here's your verb, is the quarterback. But if we're looking for the simple subject, if we have to narrow that down to one word, what is the one word this is really about? The most important person on the team, you got to get rid of that. Most important, you can kind of get rid of that, but the person, the refers to person, is goes back to person. This is your simple subject. So if we go back to those earlier sentences, these don't really matter, these first two, because both she and Ethan, they are the simple subject. So let's look at these other ones. Surrounded by darkness, the candle seemed bright. So this is your subject. But what's the simple subject? Candle. Flying toward us was a bright red kite. That's the subject. But what's the simple subject? It's the main noun. The main noun is kite. So kite is the simple subject. A compound subject is a subject made up of two or more simple subjects that have the same predicate. That probably sounded confusing, so let's look at an example. Two simple subjects that have the same predicate. So here's the predicate. Kevin and Winnie are going to the museum. So this is a compound subject because Kevin is going to the museum and Winnie is going to the museum. So you've got two things, both with the same predicate. So it's a compound subject. Okay, let's move to the predicate. The predicate is the part of a sentence containing the verb and the other information about the subject. So basically, it's everything that's not the subject. Jerome fell off the horse. Well, Jerome's the subject. Here's your verb. So all of that is the predicate. It's the verb and everything else. 1 second later, he hit the ground. Here's our main verb, our simple subject. So the predicate is everything else. Jerome cried. Here's our subject. There's our verb. That's all there is this time, so that's the predicate. So the predicate is everything other than the subject. Now the simple predicate is the main verb, the primary verb in the predicate. Here's an example. At the dance, the girls danced around the gym in their bare feet. So here's our subject. Here's the predicate. This stuff. It's all the predicate. Now, what's the thing that the girls are doing? What is the main verb? Danced. So that's your simple predicate. Just as there is such a thing as a compound subject, there is also such a thing as a compound predicate. That is when there are two or more verbs or verb phrases that share a subject and are joined by a conjunction. So with a compound subject, there are two simple subjects and one predicate. In a compound predicate, there's one simple subject, but two distinct verbs, two things that are happening. Here's an example. Charlene drove to the store and bought some socks. Charlene would be the subject, and she did two things. She drove to the store, and she bought some socks. So they're predicate number one, predicate number two, because there are two distinct verbs here. So she's doing two things. And that's all for subject and predicate. Mindeman out.